Hi, and welcome back to the SMB Secure YouTube channel, where we're focused on helping small and medium businesses build cybersecurity programs that are both effective within their budget and within their manpower. This is the first video in a new series we're starting called the 5-Minute Friday Cybersecurity for SMB Tips, where we're going to break down complex cybersecurity problems in 5 minutes and make them easy to understand. Since it's the first of 2020, and there's been a lot of discussion about the new California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, that goes into effect January 1st, 2020, which was a few days ago, depending on when you watch this video. We thought we'd start the series off with a video on CCPA. So let's go ahead and throw up 5 minutes on the clock.
All right, so we're going to break down CCPA into 11 steps or things that you need to be doing to be compliant. Let's get started. Number one, the first thing you have to do is understand whether or not the California Consumer Privacy Act applies to you. And you might be thinking by the name California residents. I don't do business in California, not me, but not so quick. The California Consumer Privacy Act applies to any organization that serves California residents and meets a couple criteria. Any of the three would make you have to be compliant. Number one, you have over $25 million in revenue. Number two, your company has the personal data on more than 50,000 people. And a quick side note, 50,000 people divided by 365 days. If your website gets 137 visitors, you would have to be compliant with the California Consumer Privacy Act. And the third stipulation is if your organization gets half or more of its revenue from the sale of personal data. So what exactly is personal data under CCPA? Personal data is essentially any piece of identifiable information that can be used to identify a person. Things like names, postal addresses, email addresses, IP addresses, account names, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, passport numbers, biometric data, internet activity, geolocation, audio or video, employment information, education information, and inferences made about the individual, things that you have concluded maybe based on an algorithm or something. And finally, anything else that can be used to identify an individual. So that's step one, figure out whether you have to be compliant and what data you have to be compliant with. If you've decided you must be compliant, the second thing you need to do is perform a personal information collection review. You need to figure out what personal information your organization is collecting about your customers. Think about your website, any lead generation tools you're using, your HR department, any data they're collecting about individuals, because CCPA does apply to your employees of your organization as well. And think about any other interactions that you might have with your customers. Okay, number three, map out data relationships. You need to create a data map. We call this a data inventory map, and it's a very important part of a privacy and security program because you have to understand what data you collect, where it resides, and what it's used for. So figure out where you collect personal information, how it's processed, how it's stored, how it's secured, and how it's shared with any other organizations. Number four, you need to review the policies and procedures on how you handle personal information in your organization. For example, you might need a policy in place that says your employees are not allowed to download your customers' personal information onto their local computer for privacy reasons, that it needs to stay within your, say, CRM or whatever database you're using. The fifth thing you need to do is make sure that your privacy policy is up to date. And there are a few very specific things that the law requires to be within your policy. You need a description of your consumers' rights. You may need to explain what data you collect about them and describe who you share that personal information with, who you sell it to if you do, and what happens with their personal data so that they know. And they have to have the right to opt out of that selling or sharing of data. Number six, create processes for customer opt-out and data deletion requests. This is a very important part of the regulation. Customers have the right to opt out of the sharing or selling of their data, and you need to make that readily available to them on your website. Make sure that is accessible, maybe in the footer or the header on every page of your website. Make sure your privacy policy is accessible on your website. Number seven, review contracts with third parties to determine anything that might need to change regarding privacy within your relationship with them and how you handle data. So outline your third party's responsibilities for handling data. That should be included within these contracts, as well as you could request the privacy policies from your third-party organizations so that you understand how they handle data and what they are doing with it and if they are treating it properly. Number eight, audit the service providers that you work with who have access to your customers' personal data. This would be things like consultants you may use, marketing consultants, SEO consultants, legal advice, any managed service providers you might be working with. Be sure that these organizations understand their responsibilities under CCPA and how they need to handle that data. Number 9, review your security controls. Part of CCPA is extreme liability and pretty severe fines for data breaches where the organization did not have reasonable security measures in place and the data was not encrypted. So go back, review your security controls to be sure that you have the proper security controls to secure personal data in your environment. Number 10, implement data encryption policies. Under CCPA, organizations are exempt from liability if the data that they are holding about their customers is encrypted. If that encrypted data is stolen, the data thefts have no access to it, right? And that can exempt you from liability. So be sure that you're encrypting your data. Look at your data maps that you created back in the previous steps. Look at where the data is, where it's stored, how it's transported, who uses it, and figure out which encryption policies or procedures you need in place. Do you need data hard drive encryption, data at rest? Do you need data in transit encryption, something like TLS or SSL? Figure out where the data is and how you can encrypt it at each phase of the data lifecycle. And finally, number 11, you need to train your employees on this new regulation. CCPA is really a game changer for cybersecurity and privacy. It gives consumers the right to know what data they have, to know that their data is being protected, and to opt out of the sale of that data. Your employees need to know that. They need to know how to handle the data they're working with on a daily basis, and it is the organization's responsibility to train them. For training to be most effective, you need to break your users into separate groups and train them based on their roles and make their training appropriate to how they handle data. So if you want our CCPA checklist, there will be a link down below in the description where you can download a PDF that will explain these 11 steps and exactly what you need to be doing for each step. If you have a question that you want answered in a future 5-minute cyber session, leave a comment down below and let us know. We're going to do our best to answer all of your questions. We want to help your business build an effective security program. We'll see you next time.